What's up, guys? Welcome into Bear Report Live. Usayd, Koshul, and Zack Pearson here. You can follow us on Twitter at Usayd Koshul and at Zack_Pearson. That's at ZACK_Pearson. You can follow Bear Report on Twitter at Bear Report. You can follow us on Facebook too at Bear Report Scout. Zack, it was an eventful day one of the 2022 NFL Draft. The action for the Bears, though, begins tonight because Chicago's slated to have 3 picks in the top 100 for the first time since 2018, which just speaks to former GM Ryan Pace's willingness to give away draft capital. But we're going to be going over some players that fell. Nakobe Dean was mentioned by Roquan Smith today. We're going to go over some best available. But how you doing?
I'm doing good, and you're right. It was an eventful first round. There was a big run on wide receivers, which kind of hurt our friends to the north in Green Bay. And I thought at one point, the six wide receivers went. I believe it was like before pick 20. And I thought the Bears pickings were going to be a little slim because you looked, Green Bay probably needed a wide receiver. Kansas City was a team that could have used a wide receiver up there. There was some options. The Lions might have gone if they didn't trade. So, yeah, I actually think, though, as we're sitting here, it's about 3 o'clock. We're just about 3 hours away. We'll be about hours, 45 minutes between when the Bears pick. I actually think the board fell pretty good for the Bears. And, I look at a player like Cole Strange. He was a guy that Andrew really liked when he was doing his scouting reports. I thought he was going to be a day 2 pick. He went to the Patriots. Tyler Linderbaum, I thought might fall. He would have been an option. But other than that, I think, there's a lot of good players left for the Bears. And here's what I'll say before we kind of get into everything. I don't think the Bears have to target wide receiver at 39 right away. Because going in this draft, they have 39, they have 48 in the second round, and then round 3 they have 71. I don't think they have to specifically pinpoint a position. I think they're in a position where they can go best available player. And you mentioned Kobe Dean, who Roquan Smith said is going to be the steal of the draft. If someone like if he's there, maybe Logan Hall on the defensive line. I think any position outside tight end, running back, quarterback, I would feel very comfortable with, especially at 39. And, if they keep 48, they could also they could address a need there. And the way it fell, I was pretty happy here going into day 2.
Yeah, I mean, let's get right into Nakobe Dean because his counterpart Quay Walker was selected by the Green Bay Packers. And
Yeah.
Daniel Jeremiah said something interesting last night regarding that selection, just talking about how he felt as if, and I think going into this draft process too, a lot of people had Nakobe Dean ranked as a higher player in the moment. But I also think that the major thing to understand is that at the NFL draft, the big thing you're trying to do is just project what a player's done in college versus what he can develop into in the NFL. And so that's a big reason that I think Quay Walker went ahead and was selected before Nakobe Dean. But, let's get into Roquan Smith's tweet, which was tweeted, I think, about an hour before we even hopped on. Nakobe Dean, I think Roquan's right. He will be a steal because a lot of people had Nakobe Dean in some cases as the first linebacker off the board. But just take us through what some of your thoughts on him are. Zack, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I'm muted. I'm sorry. For some reason my screen went down. Yeah, he's a player that I had a first round grade on. I was a little shocked, that he did, last until right now, and we'll see what pick he goes to. But yeah, I mean, he did suffer some injuries out there at Georgia, but they were a really damn good defense, and they had a lot of playmakers. And I thought, watching some Georgia games, there were games where he was the best player on the field, but you look at Trayvon Walker, he was really good at times. Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Davis, they had a lot of talent. I like Nakobe Dean. For me, it goes back to if the Bears want to go best player available, this is a guy, if he falls to 39, I don't know if he will. If he falls to 39, he's a guy I'd look at. I do think he's a 3-down linebacker in the NFL. I think, in a 4-3 scheme, he'd be a nice weak side linebacker. And the Bears, they do need more linebacker depth. I mean, right now they're going into this season or this offseason, they have Roquan Smith, they have Nicholas Morrow, and they have like a bunch of guys like Joe Thomas and like Darius Mack is there. They don't really have a good strong starter opposite of those two. So for me, hard nosed football player. Um, and like we said, the injuries, kind of the soft tissue injuries. But he was also the Buckus Awards nation's best linebacker in 2021. Good tackler, can really find a knack for getting into the backfield. And I think he'll be a good player at the next level. And if he's there, I wouldn't be shocked if the Bears honestly took him.
Yeah, Nakobe's one of those where obviously I think going best player available would be an option, but I do want to say that just throughout the Bears community, from what you see on social media, but also what a lot of the media outlets, ourselves included, have kind of been preaching, is that it is an offensive driven league. So you can't predict the way the board is going to fall. But as plugged in as we are here at the Bear Report to what's going on inside the Bears organization, I wouldn't be mad with Nakobe Dean, but it's also hard to ignore the fact that it is an offensive driven league.
Yep.
And so going offense at 39 and 48 with the talent that's left right now on the offensive side of the ball would not be a bad choice either. So really for Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus, their first ever NFL draft pick with the Bears, it's like you can't go wrong here. And again, I like to say this all the time because it's the Bears. I mean, they possibly can't mess this up, but knowing the Bears, everything's as to put it in the words of former GM Ryan Pace, everything's on the table. And
They better not mess it up. That's the thing. They can't. They can't afford really to mess it up.
right. And, I want to say this. I mean, tonight is not just important because it's the beginning of a new era for the Bears in terms of we're going to see a new generation of Bears enter the fold. It's also super important simply because I think that if you're Ryan Poles, you traded away the team's best player in Khalil Mack. And so ultimately with that, I mean, you better have some guts to back that move up and say, hey, this is what we're going to go ahead and do. And, just getting into some of the talent here that's left on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, it's very clear that the focus is two positions. You have wide receiver as well as offensive line. You guys can go ahead and chime in the comments with what you would like to see the Bears go ahead and draft or which players. But I mean, let's just get into some of the wide receivers right here because I think
Well,
that every
before we get into wide receivers, let me just go back to your point where you said it's very important and they can't screw it up. I think that's a great comment because I think when I look at this and you look at especially at 39, there's a lot of players I could go after. I think a sneaky pick for them at 39 would be someone like Andrew Booth or Roger McCreary. And here's why I say that though. I think after what's left right now with McCreary and Booth, and I believe Kyler Gordon's still there, I believe, the defensive back. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think after that, you look at like the late day two, the early day three defense. Oh, yeah, Jalen Petre's still there as well. But you look outside, I mean, Tariq Woolen's a good player, but it's a drop off. Kobe Bryant from Cincinnati, that's a significant drop off from the players that I think Booth or McCreary or Petrie could be eventually in this league. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to be hard for them to really mess it up. I do think they're in a good position here to land a good player.
And real quick, we've got the DBs pulled up. I mean, I just want to comment this right now is that Andrew Booth's one of the players that when these preseason rankings for the NFL draft started to come out, a lot of people had Andrew Booth ranked as one of the top 3 cornerbacks in
Yep.
this class. And again, he slid not because he had a up and down 2021 season. No, he slid because he had the sports hernia surgery. But when you look at Andrew Booth overall, I mean, I remember watching Clemson's week 1 game. Andrew Booth was a player who jumped off the screen because when you see Andrew Booth operate in space, my goodness, the coverage ability that he provides, but also just what he's able to do in run support. I mean, he is not easily fooled by any of these elusive running backs or wide receivers. So knowing Matt Eberflus's track record of coaching up defensive backs as well as linebackers, same thing with Alan Williams. I mean, I would not be surprised to see the Bears wait until day 3 because the Bears do have 2 fifth-round picks and a 6th-round pick tomorrow. As of right now, obviously that could change. to grab some depth pieces that could turn into potential starters. I mean, Tariq Castro Fields a name I really like in round 5, but I also think that when we look at round 2, I mean, if you're going to get an impact player like an Andrew Booth or an Kobe Dean for the defensive side of the ball, this is ultimately the round to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And, looking, I mean, a couple of comments here. Logan Hall at number 39. He'd be someone I keep an eye on as well. I don't think he'll be there. From what I'm reading, it sounds like someone like Tampa Bay is picking first here at 33. They're a team that could go after a defensive lineman. You look at Houston; they could go after a defensive lineman. Minnesota's kind of the wild card here. New coaching staff. We don't know exactly what they're going to do. And then Tennessee, I still, they've had one of the crazy drafts here, getting rid of A.J. Brown. I don't know what direction they're going in. It almost kind of feels like, we forget. I mean, they were the number 1 seed in the AFC last year. They were the top team in the AFC without Derrick Henry for a significant time. And giving rid of your best player, I know the NFL is trending with these wide receivers wanting to get paid big money. I understand it's almost kind of like the running backs where you're not going to pay a wide receiver a second contract anymore when you can just draft a new one, as the last 3 drafts have shown. They produce some really good wide receivers. But, Logan Hall, I would welcome him in. I do think Hall is a better fit on the 3-4 defense. He'll find a place, though, in the 4-3. The Bears will find something. He'll be a rotational guy. He played defensive tackle in college. I think he offers some versatility on the defensive line. And there's a couple more guys on the defensive side of the ball as well. That could be a fit. Perron Winfrey out of Oklahoma. He's a day 2 pick. They could go defensive back, but for me, I look at wide receiver, and I think this is a position where there is so much talent, and we're going to find out, if wide receiver is really high, if the Bears did fall in love with the wide receiver. They met with Christian Watson twice in the pre-draft process. I was told they met with Khalil Shakir twice in the pre-draft process and really liked him. If they fall in love with a wide receiver and he's there at 39, I think they'll go that route. But the other flip side of it is looking at the teams, again, Tampa Bay's picking 33, Minnesota, then Tennessee, then New York Giants, Houston, New York Jets, Chicago Bears. No one really in there is going to need a quarterback. Maybe Tennessee would go after a quarterback. The Vikings aren't. I don't think the Giants would. Tampa Bay might be a sneaky good team. So you could see a team trade into one of these picks before the Bears pick to take, Malik Willis or take Desmond Ridder, or take Sam Howell. And for me, that's best case scenario for the Bears because it keeps pushing the wide receivers back. I guess my point is the more these wide receivers push back, and let's say the Bears, let's pull up the wide receiver list really quick. Let's say the Bears, they have 4 guys who they are really high on wide receivers. Watson, Pickens. Let's say Alec Pierce. Let's say Sky Moore, Kelvin Austin. I don't know what they'll do with Mechie because he is hurt. He did suffer that injury. But if they get to 39, and I don't think Pickens will be there, but if they get to 39 and there's like 4 or 5 guys that they really like still there, I could see them going with a different player than wide receiver than waiting till 48 for a wide receiver because Green Bay doesn't pick. I believe Green Bay has 2 second-round picks. So they pick after the Bears. So it'll get interesting. I think the best case scenario is the wide receivers keep continuing to fall for the Bears, and they could address, maybe a defensive lineman. They could address, maybe a defensive back, maybe an offensive lineman at 39.
Yeah, and we just pulled that wide receivers list stuff. I've also on my second screen got the NFL draft order up. There's something to be said because everyone's talking about the wide receiver class that's left on the board right now is arguably stronger than any of the offensive line class that's left because we were talking about, hey, are there players like a Zion Johnson or a Tyler Linderbaum, a Kenyon Green who had a significant history of knee injuries, Cole Strange, could any of those guys fall to round 2?
Even Tyler Smith.
Right, Tyler Smith too, So the point is, when I look at the wide receivers, just go down the list here. I mean, Tampa Bay right now, they've got Chris Godwin. They just inked him to a big extension. Mike Evans is still there. They drafted Jalen something last year. I totally forgot his name. It's not Jalen Tolbert because he's a prospect this year, but it's
Jalen Darden.
Yeah, Jalen Darton, that's the one. Completely just slipped my mind, but they drafted Jalen Darton last year. Tampa Bay seems set at the wide receiver position. If anything, I think Tampa Bay is taking Logan Hall. You look at 34, I mean, we know what the Vikings had. They've got Jefferson, Adam Thielen. Tennessee just took Treylon Burks last night. So that was kind of their way of saying, yeah, we're moving on from A.J. Brown, but we're going to get A.J. Brown 2.0. You look at the Giants, there's some reports that Kadarius Toney could possibly be traded. You look at what Joe Shane did last night. He's goes ahead, grabs Evan Neal and Kayvon Thibodeau. The
Yep.
Giants still need pass catchers, but keep in mind, I mean, Kenny Galladay's still under contract there. So there's been rumors Darius Slayton, the 2019 fifth round pick, could be traded, but we don't know what exactly is going to happen. If anything, I think Darius Slayton's going to be with the Giants. You look at Houston. I mean, Houston doesn't have wide receivers that blow anyone away. So that's a team right there that could very easily decide, oh, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take one of these wide receivers. But I also think that there's a team that's going to be on the phone with the Texans who have committed to Davis Mills, and Malik Willis is going to be drafted at 37 overall. You get to 38. I mean, the Jets pretty much told us last night with their 3 first-round picks, including Garrett Wilson being one of them, hey, listen, we have Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore. We have our wide receiver duo of the future because Moore was a first-round pick last year. So, and then you get to the Bears at 39 where things get really interesting. Now, I do want to say this is that you have Seattle picking at 40 and 41. So I don't think Seattle's going to select a wide receiver.
Sam Howell. I think it's going to be Sam Howell.
Right. I think that it's time for them because you draft O-line in round 1. And so now you go a quarterback in round 2. And let's just be honest about something. I think Sam Howell is a perfect fit in terms of his play style that Pete Carroll loves in a quarterback.
Yep.
You look at 42 Indianapolis, they have guys like Michael Pittman Jr. Indy's an option at wide receiver. Atlanta took Drake London last night. Wide receivers not happening. Cleveland just traded for Amari Cooper. Baltimore did trade away Marquise Brown, so Baltimore could possibly be an option. And then you look at Detroit, 46, took a first-round receiver last night, Jamison Williams. Washington at 47 took wide receiver Jahan Dotson, who, again, I thought was a reach. So the point is that the Bears could be in a position here where there could be 2 wide receivers, and double dipping at 39 and 48 would make so much sense. But then it brings up the question of what do you do at 71st overall when looking at some of these offensive linemen?
Yeah, and Young Jersey 23 on YouTube brings up a good point. He hopes wide receivers fall, and he hopes that Ryan Poles builds in the trenches. And Ryan Poles said that they're going to build their team in the trenches, and Bears Twitter will lose it if that happens. I agree. I think if the Bears come out, let's say they take a 3 technique and then an offensive lineman with 39 and 48 and wait for a wide receiver, there's going to be some negative feedback on Twitter. But again, it goes back to the point. They're in a good position to take the best player. They want a good football player. Ryan Poles said that to us on Tuesday in his pre-draft press conference. Sometimes you just have to take a good football player. I think that's the pick with 39. I think 48, if it isn't a wide receiver at 39, they're going to go 48 wide receiver. It'll be interesting to see. It's kind of a shame because Seattle has 2 picks behind the Bears, and I'm pretty convinced they're going to take a quarterback. I think it'll be Howell or it'll be Ritter. If Willis is gone, I think Willis will be gone by the time the Seahawks pick. If they're in front of the Bears, maybe one of those picks, I could see them going, with that quarterback, and that obviously helps the Bears as well. But, keep an eye too. I mean, Deebo Samuel hasn't been traded yet. The Jets did make an offer, and San Francisco declined it. I believe it was number 10 overall, or it was a top 10 pick. So we'll see. We've already seen 2 wide receivers traded. The Bears have not really been involved in trade talks for wide receivers. However, they have an option. If a team's calling and these edge rushers are gone and then they're going, if you could pick up a 3rd rounder or a 2nd rounder for Robert Quinn this year, why not? I mean, you might have to give up another pick later on in the draft to get a 2nd or 3rd rounder. That would make some sense. I don't know if it's going to happen for sure. The Bears say they're not shopping him. But, things change. If it comes draft night and you got a team that needs an edge rusher that's in a position to win right now, and they offer you a 2nd or 3rd rounder, I would take it. I do think the option of trading back is pretty significant for the Bears. I think Ryan Poles wants to build this draft wants to build his team through the draft and acquire draft capital. But yeah, back to the offensive linemen. If you want to pull up some of those offensive lineman names again, I think it's still a strong class as it stands right now in day two. Bernhard Raymond is a guy a lot of people are talking about. Hasn't played a ton of football yet, though. He's very, very raw. He's a good player, but he's still got some work to do. You look at the kid out of Minnesota, Daniel Faley. Darian Kennard is an interior offensive lineman out of Kentucky. Excuse me. I like the kid I like that I think will be there in the third round. There's actually two guys I think will be there in the third round is Sean Ryan out of UCLA and Jamari Slayer out of Georgia. I think those are two value picks right there in the third round. You can kind of hope that they fall. Abraham Lucas is a big tackle out of Washington State. But none of these guys right now feel like they're going to come in and be a starter day one on the offensive line. I don't know how much better they're going to be right now than Tevin Jenkins or Larry Borum. But the Bears have a need. What are the Bears going to do with Tevin Jenkins? Is he going to play outside tackle? So far, that's been the case at the mandatory or voluntary mini camps. They still need an interior offensive lineman. They're not going to go into the year with Sam Mustipher as one of their starting guards. It's not going to happen. It shouldn't happen. I would be absolutely shocked if it did happen. But yeah, you got Lucas Patrick at center. You got Cody White. And then you have Larry Borum and Tevin Jenkins. So I look at those interior guards. Maybe Ryan Poles. He's a former offensive lineman. Ian Cunningham, former offensive lineman. Maybe they fell in love with a guy, like Bernhard Raymond, and maybe they think he's a good project player. But I also don't think, as Matt says here, lots of holes equals best player available. I don't think the Bears are in a position to kind of take a project type offensive lineman. I think I agree with that. A lot of holes, best player. Go get that best player with your two picks and then maybe take a project in the third round.
Yeah, and you mentioned Robert Quinn possibly being traded. I know that Ian Rappaport from NFL Network tweeted, well, the Bears aren't shopping Robert Quinn. I mean, Kevin Fishman, who's on the Bears beat too, tweeted that out first. But I also, you have to look at something here because when we talk about some of the premium edge rushers that are on the board, you have a guy like a David Ajabo, Boye Mafi from Minnesota. You have Arnold Ebekiti from Penn State. I mean, that actually kind of hurts the Bears when it comes to a Robert Quinn trade because the team could very easily say, yeah, here's this, 32, 33-year-old pass rusher that is coming off a 19 and a half sack season, but kind of has struggled at times to stay healthy over the last few years. And so ultimately, a team could say, look, trading a fifth or sixth for Robert Quinn, yeah, it sounds intriguing, but really, what are you getting in Robert Quinn versus a rookie? What you're getting in Robert Quinn is an older pass rusher. You're getting someone who has a big contract hit. You're also having to give up draft capital. Whereas with one of these guys like an Ajabo or a Mafi, you're basically getting a younger player, high upside, homegrown talent, but then also a player who you will essentially control and make part of your long-term plans for the next couple seasons. But you talk about these O-line. I mean, let me just pull some of them, our list up again. Look, Daniel Falili was a name last year that I thought a lot of people had ranked as a second round pick going into the 2021 NFL draft, but he's back this year, I think, as a kind of another second round pick. I really thought returning to Minnesota was going to do wonders for Falili, but didn't necessarily happen. I would say this is that Raymond's inexperience is hard to ignore because if Ryan Poles, look, if the actions speak louder than words, right? And if Ryan Poles drafts an offensive lineman tonight, that player is going to be a day one starter for the Bears. So that's why
they need him to be,
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree. So that's why I would kind of shy away from Raymond. So for me, I would go with Darian Kinnard or a Dylan Parham in round 2, possibly. When you get to round 3, I think that's where you have a little bit more breathing room because I would not mind a guy like a Nicholas Petit-Frere. Nicholas Petit-Frere is a guy that I don't think a lot of people are necessarily talking about, but he's been a 2 to 3 year starter at Ohio State. You remember Ohio State's offensive line just during Justin Fields' final season. Hey, they were rock solid ahead of him. Wyatt Davis, Josh Myers got drafted to Green Bay and Minnesota last year. Petit-Frere, Thayer Munford are two names to keep an eye on this year. I think with Petit-Frere, you're getting a player who's going to be a left tackle at the next level, but he's also played right tackle too. And, the Bears kind of showed us during voluntary off-season workouts, that they're all about just figuring out and experimenting what this O-line is going to look like. And so I would say this is that if you move, I think 4 out of the 5 positions on the offensive line are filled right now based on what the Bears have, but I still think this team is searching for that left tackle. And you know what? A player like a Petit Frere, I would not mind at all in round 3.
And we should also mention, like, Ryan Post, Matt Eberflus aren't married to Larry Borom and Tevin Jenkins. I mean, I hope it works out. Because they spent a second round pick on Tevin Jenkins. If they're both bad this year, it's not out of the question that their time in Chicago could be up eventually sooner than later. I'm not saying that's going to be the case because it's still very early. We haven't seen everything that we need to see out of them. But there is a scenario where they do struggle and maybe they're not the answer. And Poles is just, he's not married to him. Yeah, I mean, looking at the offensive line, well, you need the interior, man. Sailor out of Georgia, Ryan out of UCLA. Those would be my two guys. They feel like maulers up front. They feel like guys you can plug in at guard right away as starters. The tackles, man, I just don't know. I think Raymond isn't ready to start right away. And then, kind of going back to the Robert Quinn talk, a team I keep an eye on that I think would actually be a great fit for Robert Quinn, a great fit for the Bears, and there's a tie there. Kansas City needs an edge rusher. And if some of these guys fly off the board early, are they a team that, maybe they want to trade up to 39, maybe not even a trade for?
All right, so looks like Zack is frozen, but
oh, am I frozen? I think no. I think I'm good. I think Usayd is frozen here. Anyway, I'll keep going. Yeah,
okay.
You good? I think you froze
Yeah.
there for me in a second.
Okay, because you froze on my end. So typical StreamYard difficulties.
Yeah. No. And I think Robert Quinn. It would be great for him to go to Kansas City. They're a team I think that can compete, can be is a legit contender. Sorry, not compete. Obviously, they can compete, but compete for a Super Bowl title again, and it would kind of work out good on that end. I just don't know if the Bears would want to go back. I think Kansas City's at 50 in this draft. But if some edge rushers go and they might want to trade up, they're at 1562. The Bears could be in a spot there.
Yeah, 50th overall for Kansas City.
Yep. The Bears could be there at 39. Maybe that's a trade destination, even if it's not for Robert Quinn. So, yeah, we'll have to see. I think it's going to be an exciting night, though, and I think the Bears are in a good shape no matter what they do here. I think they're in a good position to kind of pick a legit playmaker. I think they're going to get 2 starters. Right away.
All right, so yeah, we apologize for the technical difficulties. StreamYard always seems to do this, but we don't know of a better platform. But yeah, I think kind of wrapping up here in the last 10 minutes, we talked heavily about the quarterbacks, the edge rushers, some of the wide receivers, even the offensive line. I mean, I think just, my overall thoughts are this is that there was a lot of panic last night about the way that the board fell for the Bears. And I think that, early on you look at it, I mean, no one, let's be honest, the top 5, the top 10 even I should say was I think about as predictable as it gets because we knew that there was kind of that handful of players that were going to be picked in the top 10 and we kind of could already tell who was who. I would say the biggest surprise in the top 10 was not even Kayvon Thibodeau sliding to 5 or Evan Neal being the second offensive tackle off the board. It would actually be, I think, Drake London being the first wide receiver drafted. But I also think that when you look at, the way kind of the round progressed, when we saw Kenyon Green, Trevor Penning, Zion Johnson go off the board, Linderbaum, Cole Strange, that's when people really started to kind of go ahead and panic. Okay, you know what? Some of these players that we thought would fall to round 2 are not there. But then you look at how the back half of the round played out. The Jets took Jermaine Johnson, the Jags took Devin Lloyd, Devontae Wyatt going to Green Bay, Cole Strange, Karlaftis, Daxton Hill, Lewis Sign. I mean, the middle part of the first round had Bears fans in full blown panic mode. The back half, though, kind of stabilized things and now sets the stage moving forward for the Bears to really come out winners on day 2 of the draft.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be exciting. I'm really excited to see what they can do. Yeah, again, to wrap it up though, maybe we should probably give a prediction. What we think they're going to do at 39, if you're cool with that.
Absolutely. So I've kind of gone back and forth because I've had a lot of people ask me, what are the Bears going to do tonight? I just think that's just what happens when you walk 30,000 steps a day and work in education. But I would say this, I think the Bears are going to go wide receiver tonight at 39th overall, just because it's like I outlined earlier in the live stream. I mean, Tampa, Minnesota, Tennessee, the Giants, the Texans, the Jets. Hey, the only team that really has a significant glaring hole at wide receiver is the Texans, who have been trying to fill that since they traded DeAndre Hopkins away. But I would say the Bears are going to go wide receiver at 39. I mean, the fan base, I think, wants a Christian Watson or even a George Pickens. Forget Pickens off field concerns. You really can't go wrong with either of them. And then I think at 48, we're going to see a trade back to accumulate what I believe is going to be a high third round pick. So the Bears will have 2 picks in the third round then, as well as a fourth round pick, because that 48th overall pick, I mean, looking at, there's going to be a team that's going to have to move up for a playmaker. And
Yep.
that actually works to the Bears' advantage, because at 48th overall, if you trade out of that spot and you trade down, you're guaranteeing yourself possibly swapping a second round pick and then getting either a third or a fourth round pick in the process, which I think sets the Bears up to add more depth to the roster tomorrow.
Yeah, my pick. I'm kind of torn. I think they're going to go with one or two positions at 39. I think it's going to be either wide receiver, excuse me, or defensive back. I'm kind of torn. I think Andrew Booth is a good player that could be there that they could go with, but I'm going to make my pick. I'm going to say it's going to be this guy we're going to show on the screen right here. North Dakota State's Christian Watson. I think he'll slip there to 39. Met with the Bears twice already in the pre-draft process. He's a guy that can come in and help Justin Fields out. I think he'll be the guy at 39 for the Bears. I think they'll try to, maybe if Roger McCreary falls at 48, I think they'll go that route. But I think the Bears get a playmaker on offense. I think they get a nice, solid piece on defense. And in the third round, we'll see what they do. Maybe they trade out. Maybe they go offensive line. But I think they're going to find a couple good players and a couple good starters here on Friday night.
All right, guys. So that's going to do it from us. Make sure you're following myself and Zack on Twitter at Usayd Koshul, at Zack Pearson. That's ZACK_Pearson. Follow Bear Report on Facebook at Bear Report Scout. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at Bear Report, as well as at Picks for Pulls. We're going to be active all weekend, probably going to be up till this is, I think, my fourth NFL draft with Bear Report. So that means we're going to be up till 1 or 2 in the morning covering this. Zack will be live from Hallis Hall today, getting the full reactions, and then I will be covering it from home. But we're going to have you guys covered with the best coverage possible, I promise. But until then, guys, bear down, stay safe, enjoy the draft tonight.
See you guys later.